All right, everyone, welcome to another episode of Beyond the Naked Eye. I am joined here by aspiring radio personality and musician, Richard Phillip. How are you?
I am great. How are you, Brian?
I'm doing pretty good.
Yeah, thank
So,
you for having me on.
dude, it's a pleasure. I think you're such an interesting dude.
Oh, thanks, man.
All right.
Yeah.
Just to start, I obviously know you from the program, but could you tell me what got you into broadcasting?
So it's kind of an interesting story. I actually started out in broadcasting when I was much younger than I am now. I'm 21, or actually I'm 20 now. I will be 21 in June. But I started when I was 14. I was still in elementary school, just starting high school, and one of my teachers said, "Well, there's this new radio station in Huntsville, which is my hometown that I'm in now, uh, and they have just gone FM." And they're looking for volunteers. So I said, I would really like to give it a try. Uh, Fast forward 6 years, I was a volunteer there for 4 years. I've already finished 3 years of Niagara College's broadcasting, radio, television, and film program, and I love it. So honestly, it's one of those things where I didn't initially know that I wanted to do it, but now that I've been in it for 6 years, I can't imagine myself doing anything else.
Well, I don't know if I actually told you this, but you got me into Niagara College for the broadcasting program. Like, through talking to you is
Yes.
what inspired me.
You
Uh,
mentioned that, and I was very humbled by that. So thank
yeah.
you.
My question is actually, what brought you to the college? And now that you're in your final year, how was that experience?
So I guess mostly what brought me to the college, at least Niagara College in particular, was the breadth of the program. Because I was sort of prospecting the idea of choosing one of the other programs that were available. I could have gone to Fanshawe because that's one of those major radio colleges that people go to. They've got their own performing arts program. They play student music, that sort of thing. So that's always neat. And of course there's a whole bunch of other colleges in Ontario, Canada, that even offer broadcasting programs that are just like this. But it was different because it gave me other opportunities. And that's what I wanted to explore the most, because I had been in radio for 4 years prior to coming to Niagara College. But I just wanted to make sure that it was the only avenue of broadcasting that I was really interested in exploring. Um, Fast forward 3 years later, that is the case. I love radio. I mean, I like the other aspects of broadcasting. I enjoy doing production. I enjoy shooting stuff. I enjoy doing film, but
Mhm.
it's not my general sort of area of expertise. And I've spent long enough in radio at this point that it's what I want to do. I like it.
Well,
I
fair
like
enough.
it a lot.
Yeah, fair. I mean, you got me. Like I said, you got me into the program, and honestly, I really enjoy it. And
Yeah, man.
so yeah, I
Well, I mean,
guess.
what are you liking about it so far?
Well, I actually really enjoy the television aspect.
Mm.
I didn't know what I wanted to do prior to like starting college because I did like co-op in high school at a radio station, Bayshore Broadcasting. Shout out Bayshore Broadcasting, and
Hey.
it was really fun. But I was like, I don't know. I I was just torn. So I guess that's why I took the program. And I remember doing the tour and meeting Kalina, shout out Kalina. And
Yes.
she's like, oh, yeah, you get to do a bit of everything and then you choose what you like. So then I did it. And then, yeah, then I took the program and I really enjoyed radio still. And I really enjoyed TV. So, like, when I graduate, if a radio position is offered to me, or if that's an avenue I can pursue, then I'm all for it. But I still kind of want to do TV, and I found that out this year. Um, yeah, I really enjoy it, and I think there's more of a market, personally, in my opinion, for TV. So I just feel like that's the best avenue to pursue. But I'm all for radio, man. I respect radio, and I love it.
Yeah, man. I kind of agree with you in that sense as well, that like there's a lot of avenues for unexplored avenues for TV, especially because like think about it. It's funny because so much of that knowledge translates really, really well to, you know, um, YouTube or, streaming any kind of online service, because think about how much content people are consuming on their cell phones or on their
Hmm.
laptops these days. It's not all cable TV anymore.
Hmm. Yeah, and I was just gonna say that actually that this broadcasting is the reason I even did a podcast in general. And I feel like I've gotten much better at editing and just much better. I'm much more comfortable on camera. Like I saw a video on my YouTube channel of me like 10 years ago saying thank you for 20 subscribers. And like I looked like I looked like a snuff film. Like I was just kind of in front of the camera. Thank you guys so much for doing like someone had a gun to my head off camera. So it's just crazy like how far I feel I've come since taking the program. But
yeah,
hey, man,
quite the same, man. Quite the same.
Yeah, I gotta thank you, man. Like you're the reason I'm here.
Based. You're doing great, man. Props to you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. So now that you're in your final year, what do you feel like you're going to do for work? Are you confident in getting a job? Has COVID like affected anything?
That's a good question and kind of a hard one to answer because again, I just like a lot of broadcasters, it's we're sort of at this state where nobody really knows what the hell we're going to do, you know, because for people like me who are on, you know, in the stage of their internship, right? You know, we're doing internships and many of us are doing them remotely. Some of us had to take internships at the college because broadcasters just aren't offering those opportunities right now because of the pandemic. And so when you look at that and you look at what job prospects look like that, it's not pretty. And then, of course, on top of that, you've probably heard the news that Bell just did a whole bunch of job cuts. So, you know, there was management that's gone. Stations have either changed format or folded. It's really unfortunate. So, having said that, in a perfect world, I would definitely be working in radio, because that's what I've been doing for years. I love it. I've always loved radio. It's best way I like to describe radio is theater of the mind. You know,
I feel like I've heard that before.
Yeah, I think it's a common expression that people have used to describe radio. Lots of classic radio jokes, you know, but I mean, it really is because you're not really seeing the person behind the mic. You know, you make that stuff up in your head before you ever you've probably experienced this before where, you know, you're listening to the radio and before you've ever seen a picture of what this DJ looks like or met this guy in person, you know, you make a picture of them in your head, you know, so that's part of it. But I mean, you know, there's all those other aspects as well. And I just, I love it in terms of the where, that's another thing that's hard to say too, because realistically, you know, it could be anywhere. Radio DJs, you know, fresh out of college, a lot of them have moved across the country. You know, I had a friend that was working in BC for a while, with Vista Radio there. That was pretty neat. So, you know, I'm not averse to that, but top goals would really be working at, you know, big market station like Chum or, you know, something like that.
just to circle back to what you said about that whole, like imagining the voice, like what they look like in your head. Yeah. I find it so funny how like, once you actually see a picture of them, you're always just like, that's what that person looks like.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's such an interesting thing. So yeah, that is a really good point.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I remember the first time that happened to me because, and this was well before I actually got into radio in the first place. But in my sort of area that I live in, Parry Sound, Muskoka, there's this really prevalent guy who happens to be the cluster programming director for Vista in this area. His name's Dave Newman. Years ago, before Vista Radio bought out the stations here, he was on the Huntsville station. Big, deep, velvety voice. And, you know, I just imagined him as like this handsome fella, big, you know, big jawline, muscular. And, you know, I mean, Dave's a good looking guy, but he didn't look anything like I imagined him to be. So, you know, certainly a little different than
I love the first word you say, handsome. I'm like, oh Jesus, this guy like ugly as fuck or what?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah.
So we already kind of just touched on this, but what is your ideal situation in say 3 years' time? And I asked this because I know you also make music. Is that something you want to pursue as well, or is that just more for the enjoyment?
That's a good question too. I haven't really decided. You know, I mean, I'm kind of this is the thing. This is what this pandemic has done. This has forced me to kind of sit down and very clearly think about what it is I want to do, because 3 years ago, I was definitely set on radio, and I still am. I love this industry with all my heart, but I think nowadays that I've gotten more into my element, more into music production, which I've been doing that for years, longer than I've been doing broadcasting. It's a hard decision to make whether or not I want to focus on one thing or the other, because in some cases it's hard to focus on both at the same time. One of them just has to become a hobby. It can't be full time. So ideally, um, one of two things are going to happen. And it's more likely going to be the former. Radio is going to be my, you know, primary career, and then music is just going to be a side hobby, and I might make some small singles, and hopefully people will like it, and that's fine, and I'm fine with that, because creating is just what I do. I like doing that. On the other hand, if in some perfect world my music were to be enjoyed by enough people that it were to be a sustainable source of income, if I were to do some more marketing, some more research, improve my own production technique, I suppose, then those roles might be reversed, is what I mean to say. So, either way, I would be content in any case, but I don't know where I'd see myself in 3 years times there. But again, in terms of radio, definitely want to be in that big market area. I think of myself right now as a small fish in a very large sea.
Mm-hmm.
Very green, but I want to be less green.
Well, actually, I was just talking to my last podcast, the band No Service. Shout out to them. I asked them this question, and they said, obviously, it'd be ideal to pursue music full time because that's what they love. But it's like they have to be realistic and pursue other things. Do you feel the same, or are you more just like radio?
No, I do feel the same way. I think it's hard because, especially in, and I know this is kind of a cliche thing to say, but understanding the music industry the way it is now, it's really, really hard to break in if you don't have a whole lot of talent. You're not prolific. You're not good at what you do. And so, you really have to hone in on those elements if you want to be a successful musician, right? You got to be gigging, you got to be touring all the time. You have to put in a massive amount of work. And if you're going to do it, it can't just be something where you just all of a sudden say, well, I'm going to go on a tour. No, like you really gotta plan these things out. You have to put a lot of effort into it, and that takes up a lot of time, so that's important. And so for me, I don't think I really want to put that much into it off the bat. I think radio is my safer bet because, on top of it being a sustainable career, it's something I've enjoyed doing for years. And I like I said before, I couldn't imagine doing anything else. So,
Well,
that's
actually,
where I'd rather be.
congratulations actually on ranking number 4 for Walk Away in local music. That's really cool.
Yeah, thank you. I can't even believe you saw that. That's awesome. Yeah, that was the local top 20 countdown for songs of the year in Huntsville on our local radio station here.
How is that vote? Is that like a voting system, or is that like?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was an online vote. And it was a whole bunch of local artists, local musicians. Tactics took the top spot, and he's a rapper, really, really talented guy. I've seen him live. And of course, there were some other very talented people above me as well. So, very well deserved. But I was humbled to find out that I got number 4. So
that's still really cool. And I listened to it. I really liked it.
Thanks, man. I'm glad. I'm glad.
Well, do you think you have an inspiration for your music? I know you're a big Steely Dan guy.
Oh yeah, yeah. I wish I could take inspiration from Steely Dan, because God knows I listen to too much of them on a regular basis. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really know who my influences are. I mean, I listen to a lot of different music, so it's really hard to pick and choose a singular influence, or any number of influences. There's so many things going on musically in my head at one time. Like, It's funny because that Walk Away single is sort of like a singer-songwriter kind of folk deal. And more of the stuff that I've been working on recently has been a lot more electronic and alternative. And that's kind of the direction that I've been going recently. But, for all I know, that could change. It's one thing to the next. I don't know exactly what I'm doing next because I got, so many things going on at the same time. So if I come up with something new that I really like, then that might just be my style for a while.
Well, actually, one thing I really want to mention once again is in my podcast last week with No Service, I thought they were really interesting because there's a 6-member band and they all have different like tastes in music, but they find a way to kind of all blend it together instead of conflicting. Do you ever find yourself conflicting with yourself when making music, or just try to mash everything you like all into one?
I do find myself conflicting with myself. That internal conflict is happening. Is what I mean to say. It's interesting because, again, there's so many genres of music that I listen to. My favorite is jazz, believe it or not. I absolutely love jazz.
You like jazz?
You like jazz?
Yeah. I have to.
Yeah, obligatory. Yeah, but the thing is, jazz is a genre. Another thing as well, I'm self-taught. All the stuff,
wow.
all of my instruments, my keyboards, all of the production tools I use, that sort of stuff. It's all self-taught. I never had anybody to teach me how to use that stuff. So I just, taught myself on my own. And of course, I took piano when I was younger, but I never tried. I never tried with the lessons. I just tried to teach myself because I wasn't really interested in going through the whole process of learning to do it correctly. So, I just did it. But yeah, because of that, there's in terms of jazz, jazz is probably one of the most melodically and harmonically complex styles of music that exists, in my opinion, and I think a lot of people would agree. So as much as I love that style, it's just I can't do it because I just don't have the technique down, right? So I think which is another thing. It reminds me to stay humble as well, because I know that there are always musicians that they're probably struggling with their own internal musical conflict, but at the same time they have the theory and the technique down that I don't. Those are the kind of people that I have great reverence for,
Well, one thing I actually think that's really interesting and I want to point out was, personally for me, ever since starting this podcast, it's just something I've really enjoyed so much, to the point where now a day-to-day schedule, it's like, I got to schedule another podcast, but I got to do this assignment for school. Do you find yourself doing that with your music and your broadcasting, where it's like, I got to make a song, but I also got to do this?
Honestly, yeah, that's funny, because honestly, I'm not even really sure. I've probably been neglecting my schoolwork and trying to focus on my music more. Like, as we talk about this, I've just been, I had just finished working on another single recently, and I'm sending it off to be mastered. So that way I can, make some more stuff for an EP that I want to release at some point this year. But, if I'm working on something and it's just not right, then I'm struggling with artist block at all times, unless I've got something good going on. And, I feel like because of that, I probably haven't been focusing on the college work as much as I should. So, definitely need to be a better student, admittedly.
Has COVID altered your mindset? Because I think one thing you got to give credit for the virus, for the pandemic, is being able to quarantine. You have so much time to yourself to just like break down stuff. Do you feel differently now coming out of the pandemic compared to going into the pandemic?
Well, I mean, that's the thing. We're still in the pandemic, and we probably will be for a while yet.
That's
here,
true.
So,
yeah, that's true.
I would say almost certainly, everything has changed. There's not a single thing about my life that is exactly as it was when we first entered this pandemic. When we started on this pandemic back in, I think it was March of last year
Mm-hmm.
is when the college closed. And we're almost at March again, so it'll be pretty much a year since this pandemic started, if you can believe that.
It's
Um,
crazy.
everything is nuts. I mean, I'm living in my parents' basement right now,
Nice.
so but yeah, it does give you a lot of time to think to yourself. I've definitely done a lot of self-reflecting. Some of it has not been good self-reflecting. Some of it has been stuff where I've looked at myself and said, this is certainly something I want to change. And then there have been other things where I've looked at myself and said, you did a good job there. Because you got to give yourself those occasional opportunities just to sort of give yourself kudos for the things that you have achieved.
Mm-hmm.
you know but other than that, I mean, really most of the things that have changed for me have all just been physical. Like, I mean, I was living in Welland for the past 3 years, and now I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm disconnected from a lot of those people that I spent most of my time with in the previous 2 years. So moving from an environment where you're constantly among like-minded people, um, to sort of being, for the lack of a better phrase, thrown into an environment where you're not. You're sort of wrapped up in your own thoughts with a limited number of people, albeit good people, but a limited number of people. It's different. It's so different.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely changes my mindset as a whole.
Mm-hmm. That's fair. Who would have thought that back in March we'd still be in this mess for a whole year?
Yeah, no kidding.
I honestly
didn't.
thought, well, I honestly thought on the day I was going back home to live back home. Essentially, I'm like, 2 weeks I'll be back. I thought it was gonna be nothing, and it's crazy
Yeah.
how we're almost a year into it, and it's still, even though there is a vaccine and there's light at the end of the tunnel, it's probably
Yeah.
gonna still be a while until they actually start planning out mass vaccinations.
Oh yeah, and the other thing as well is, I mean, even after everybody's vaccinated, because vaccination is really doing is just sort of, I guess, stopping you from getting sick. But you could still carry it. So that begs the question of whether or not this virus will really go away.
Mm-hmm.
It could just stick around and lay dormant and everything. And as long as you're not if you're not vaccinated, then you're gonna get sick.
Mm-hmm. And it could be it could be just like the flu, where it's like you got to take a shot every single year.
Yeah.
It could be one of those things, and that's so crazy to think about.
Yeah, I strongly agree. Amen. If it's necessary, then it's necessary. Whatever keeps the human population alive.
Yeah. Whatever
Yeah.
whatever makes everything normal, I think I'm willing to
Yeah.
do. Yeah.
I agree.
Okay, so I'm gonna switch topics here. This is a bit of a loaded question, but it's something I'm very curious about. One thing I heard, and I really want to ask you, is I heard you're on the spectrum of autism. Now, I don't honestly entirely know what that means. Could you explain it?
I will. So yeah, it's true. I have autism spectrum disorder. Classically, at the time when I was diagnosed, which would have been when I was I want to say 5 or so. I was real young. They would have called it Asperger's syndrome. So you've probably heard that term used before. Basically, it's sort of a mental disorder, but I mean, I don't want to classify it as a disorder in the class of it's bad, it's horrible. No, it's something that you deal with, And the thing with autism spectrum disorder is everybody who is on the autism spectrum, they sort of express it differently. Some are on the low end of the spectrum, some are on the high end of the spectrum. Some people are nonverbal, some people are hyperactive. For me, I think it probably showed most in, I guess, the musical stuff and in the linguistic stuff, which is probably partially why I'm in radio. But when I was young, my parents have told me this story a million times. I was 2 and I was already reading. So
What? That's crazy.
Yeah. I started reading real young. It's interesting, but it comes with downsides, right? Stuff that I've had to deal with throughout my life. when I was in elementary school, and this was around the time when schools, educational institutions in general were just, we'll medicate them so that way they won't, they won't be an issue.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's automatically the student that's the issue, and not working around mental disorders, right? To make sure that they're comfortable with having to medicate, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they really wanted to put me on Ritalin. That's like, that was a pretty common thing up until then. And it took a meeting with the principal, where my dad said, Richard, come here and read this newspaper article. And he said, this kid does not need to be medicated. He needs to be, he needs assistance.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I think progressively that's sort of become the standpoint. But that really helped. That really helped me. I'm very grateful for all the support I've received from EAs and educational staff and that sort of thing over the years, because I don't think I would be the same person I am today if I had just been, drugged up on Ritalin for years.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's interesting because you're such a gifted and talented person.
Oh, thanks.
How specifically did you get assistance?
I mean, mostly it was just educational stuff, right? Like, I mean, I don't think I really ever needed any physical therapy. I mean, I didn't have any speech impediments or anything like that. I wasn't massively subject to sensory overload or anything like that. It still happens to me sometimes, but it's rare. And so mostly it was just, stuff like staying focused. That's something I've always had difficulty with. Even when I'm not in school, I have difficulty focusing on one task at a time. I get distracted so easily. And that was one of my biggest crutches in school. All through elementary school, all through high school, was I would get easily distracted. So primary thing was somebody to just remind me that I need to be doing shit. I have one task to be focusing on, and I just need to focus on it and get it done, as opposed to screwing around and whatever in class. So that was helpful.
Well, to your credit, I feel like that's a really normal thing, because for me personally, I know that whenever I have to do radio scripts when I'm an announcer, I will take 7-8 hours to write a script, and people are like, what the hell takes you so long? But half the time I'm just on my phone, just scrolling through social media. I honestly, I as well can just not stay focused. Unless it's something I'm super passionate about. But obviously announcing isn't my my go-to gig. So obviously sometimes it kind of feels like a chore. So sometimes I'm just like, ugh, I'm just gonna go on my phone for a bit. And then half an hour later, it's like, oh shit, I need to get this done. And I type a bit out. And I'm like, oh, I see a meme. It's like, oh, okay, what else you got? And then, oh shit. It's that's constantly my process.
I feel that 100%. Anytime I was writing this is part of the reason I got out of writing my scripts out fully and into writing talking points as quickly as possible, because I always get distracted, and it takes you double as long to write the same script if you had just written down talking points. So it makes that process 100 times easier, but still, yeah.
Well, one thing I actually wanted to mention was I know the activist Greta Thunberg. I know she has Asperger's, but she says she uses it as a superpower. Is that something you can relate to?
I would say so. I mean, I recognize that. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I was able to do at a young age that a lot of people maybe have never learned how to do, or I was just able to pick up on my own without additional influence. So knowing what most of society thinks of that, I mean, I guess that's pretty cool, being able to do that. I guess I would consider that a superpower. But looking at it in context, I mean, I still have to recognize it for what it is. I mean, I still had a lot of struggles throughout my childhood, and I still do now. So there's always stuff that I got to face. But all in all, superpower would be a way to describe that.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Well, you did mention this earlier, and I kind of want to circle back to it. What do you think stigma people have? Okay, how do I say this? English. Okay. What stigmas do you think people have when it comes to children who are on the autistic spectrum?
I think the biggest stereotypes are mostly directed towards people who are nonverbal, especially the young kids, that have meltdowns because they're experiencing sensory overload, or they're um they've maybe experienced a texture or a taste or a smell or something that they really don't like. um you know, it's funny because that happens to so many young kids when they're still in that developmental stage, and they, normal people will just pass that off as, well, he or she is a misbehaved child, but really that's just, a symptom of the condition that they're dealing with, of the condition that they're in. And for older people like me, it's hard to tell what the stereotypes are, because honestly, I never really knew what people thought of me, and I never really knew what people thought of autistic people in general. Um, you know, just I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's still hard to tell. Like, I mean, you talk to people about autism, and I mean, nowadays it seems to be a generally accepted thing that people have autism. It's a mental disorder,
Mm-hmm.
and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
Is there anything for anyone tuning in that you'd like to say regarding this?
not really. I mean,
Oh.
just understand that. I mean, there are some people who process the world differently, and um, for those people, it's important that you just be patient and give them an opportunity to understand. For me especially, one of my biggest things is not understanding things that somebody says the first time. I'll get into a long, deep conversation with people, and this has happened numerous times where I don't exactly fully comprehend what it is that they're trying to say, and they might have to repeat it like a second time or something. My
Mm-hmm.
brain just needs time to grasp the concept.
Mm-hmm.
That's all.
Well, I asked that question because personally, one thing I kind of experience whenever I come across someone who is on the autistic spectrum is, once I hear that news of like, oh, they're on the spectrum of autism, I'm like,
Yeah.
and instantly I'm thinking, okay, I have to tread lightly because I don't want to
Yeah.
say anything that could possibly offend them. Do you think it's okay to ask people about that kind of stuff?
Um, I think it depends on who you ask. Because for me, I'm open about the fact that I have autism, that I'm on the autism spectrum disorder, or the autism spectrum. But for some people that might be a bit more of a touchy topic.
Mm-hmm.
It really depends on who you ask, and also I think sensitivity is a key factor in that as well. I mean, if you're asking the question, then the reason why you're asking the question should not be offensive. It shouldn't be for shock value, or just for if you're asking just out of pure interest. I can't say, because for me it's okay, but for other people it might not be.
Mm-hmm.
Is the gist of it.
That's fair. I think like one thing, that's why I asked you that question, is I'm
Yeah.
genuinely curious, but that's one thing I'm like, oh no, I don't know how this is gonna go. So that's why again I have to tread lightly. So you'd say it's a person to person kind of thing.
I think it is a person to person kind of thing, but again, I can't really say. You just you gotta ask.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do ask, just be sensitive. I don't think there is anything wrong with having a level of sensitivity when asking people those kind of questions, because it is personal in a way. We're talking about something that somebody has mentally been dealing with for their entire lives, and they that is how they experience the world.
Mm-hmm.
So, and for other people that might be different, but it's important to understand that it's not just like a spectacle.
Mm-hmm.
It's there, and people are dealing. It's a perfectly normal thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just it. I don't think there's anything wrong with asking about it, though.
Should it be approached similarly to like people who have like clinical depression? Because obviously you don't go up to somebody like, "Are you clinically depressed? Do you want to talk about it?" You know?
Yeah. Honestly, I would almost approach it the same way. Like, I mean, you wouldn't just outright be like, "Yo, are you autistic?" No, you wouldn't do that. It's not gonna happen. Yeah. So, you know. And then you wouldn't go up and ask somebody if they're autistic. You wouldn't ask somebody if they're clinically. You can just go walk up and ask somebody if they're clinically depressed. You know, relevance and sensitivity.
Okay.
Two important factors there.
I really hope you don't think I actually go up to people and be like, yo, you got
autism. No, certainly not. Certainly not.
I don't know why. I just like imagine that in like a college party. Like someone just goes up to you, he's like, "Yo, you got autism?" It's just like,
First off, what prompted you to ask that question?
Yeah,
that would be my first. That would be my first question in response. A question with a question.
Yeah. Well, thank you for talking about that. 'Cause that's something I was really interested in. And
I think it's important to be open about it.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like this conversation has actually taught me quite a bit about it.
Oh yeah, I'm glad. I'm glad.
All right, just my final question, a part of this segment, is what are your objectives, both short term and long term, if you have them?
That's another good question. They've kind of changed over time, you know. I suppose I've had a number of objectives, but right now my key ones are, first off, getting out into the industry as a broadcaster, and secondly, being somewhat successful in that respect. You know, I have never courted gigantic successes where, you know, I would be working at stations like Chum, or, you know, going, you know, in a perfect world, you know, if I was, you know, the most amazing broadcaster in the universe, you know, heading over to stations in the United States, WABC, WLS, you know, these amazing stations that have existed in North America, which even people in Canada could hear for years, you know, and still can. So, yeah, I it's a dream to be able to work at those kind of stations, but it's not something that I realistically expect myself doing.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of music, I still don't know where that's going, so that's a hard question to answer. Yeah, but I definitely excuse me, Daniel is over here behind me, bunny ears. Sinner. Yes. Yeah. So I don't, and the other thing is, you know, nothing I say about these goals will ever be set in stone. I mean, I've been known to change my mind on anything and everything related to my own goals for years. You know, years ago, before I got into radio, I wanted to make a technology startup and make computers. So, you know, I thought that would be a cool thing to do. Of course, you know, not happening.
Yeah.
But I'm broadcasting now, so those goals have changed. So, you know, I don't know.
Well, one thing I find kind of interesting that I've encountered over my previous podcast episodes is not a lot of people strive for like superstardom anymore. They're more so saying, I want a small audience, I want my niche, and I want enough to live off of. Is that something you can kind of relate to, or do you want to reach the top?
I can kind of relate to it. I mean, I do want to reach for the top. I mean, you know, anybody should want in this industry. I think anybody should want to reach for the top, you know, because there's a lot at the top of the broadcasting industry in the biggest markets. Those are the places you really want to be if you want, I think, the most that the broadcasting industry has to offer. However, you know, those are just approximations for me, because I can never know what it's truly like to be up there. Right now, because I've actually been in that state where I've, you know, had a small audience that I could communicate with, that I could relate to, it's manageable. I enjoy it. It's not stressful. Whereas, you know, in a larger audience area, a bigger market, I sort of have that stress on my head where, say, in Toronto, where listenership is, you know, in the hundreds of thousands, if not more than that, you know, it's positively insane. It's positively insane. And my brain, you know, it makes me stressed. It makes me anxious. So, I worry about that, but at the same time, I feel like if I was there, I might not be, so I wouldn't have so much trepidation about it. I might be more willing. And I think I still am, but I have to actually get to that point first. So we'll see what happens.
All right, fair enough, man. I wish you the best in that regard.
Thanks, man.
Okay.
Quite the same to you.
I appreciate it. Much love. Yeah. All right, so now we're hopping into my next segment. So this is completely different. So I'm going to ask you questions, but it's quick fire. So you just got to answer it right off the top. No thinking, no breaking it down, just boom. You got that? You ready?
Yeah.
All right, Richard, you have to answer. Books or movies?
Movies.
Radio or television?
Radio.
Classic rock or punk rock?
Punk rock.
Retro computers or retro video games?
Oh. Retro computers.
I knew that won't trip you up. Huntsville or Welland?
Huntsville.
Coffee or tea?
Tea.
Fight 50 duck-sized horses or one horse-sized duck?
One horse-sized duck.
CRNC or Hunter's Bay?
Oh, man. You're going to turn me against my own station? Oh, gosh. Definitely Hunter's Bay Radio.
Okay.
The birthing grounds.
Okay. Beer or wine?
Beer.
And then finally, last question. If you could have dinner with any person in the world right now, who would it be?
Oh, man. John Landecker. John Records Landecker. Records truly is his middle name.
All right. Yes. That's all the questions I have for you, Richard. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Yeah, man. Thank you for having me. It's been great.
Yeah, I thought we had a really good conversation. I learned quite a bit.
Yeah, man. I'm pleased.
All right. As part of this final segment, I want to roll out the red carpet for you, man. Plug whatever you want.
All right. Fair enough. Well, yeah, I mean, I don't really have that much going on musically right now, but you can listen to me on Spotify, Richard Phillip. Or if you want, you can check out my SoundCloud where I post all my occasional single releases and the weird stuff that I do. That's soundcloud.com/OOCCA, Uka. And that's pretty much it.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much, man. Okay. That's fine, man. You plugged what you want. And thanks so much again for being on.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. Take care.
All right. It's been another episode of Beyond the Naked Eye. I'm your host, Brian Correa. Please like and subscribe. I'll see you next time.